For decades, the space industry was built on a simple assumption. Going to space would always be expensive. Governments dominated the market. A handful of aerospace giants built rockets through vast networks of suppliers. Every launch took years of planning, cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and ended the same way. Once the mission was complete, the rocket was discarded, crashing into the ocean or burning up in the atmosphere. No one questioned it. It was simply how the industry worked. Then, in 2002, a small startup entered one of the toughest industries on Earth with an idea many experts considered unrealistic. That company was SpaceX. Most people see SpaceX as a rocket company. They watch spectacular launches, dramatic landings, and breathtaking footage from space. But the rockets are only the visible part of the story. Behind every launch is a business strategy, a strategy that challenged decades of accepted thinking, reshaped the economics of spaceflight, and forced an entire industry to rethink the way it operated. SpaceX didn't become successful because it built better rockets. It became successful because it asked better questions. Instead of asking, how can we make today's rockets slightly better, it asked, why are rockets built this way in the first place? That shift in thinking transformed SpaceX from an ambitious startup into one of the world's most valuable private companies, launching satellites, transporting astronauts, and operating one of the largest satellite internet networks on Earth. But the most fascinating part isn't what SpaceX built, it's how it built it. Because the principles behind its success can be applied far beyond aerospace. Whether you're building a business, investing for the future, or trying to solve difficult problems, the same ideas can change the way you think. So, how did one company disrupt an industry that had remained largely unchanged for decades? To answer that, we have to understand the industry SpaceX walked into. Before SpaceX, the space industry wasn't short on talent. It wasn't short on demand either. Governments needed satellites. Scientists needed research missions. Companies relied on space for communications, navigation, weather forecasting, and national security. The demand was already there. The real problem was cost. Launching anything into orbit required enormous budgets, long development cycles, and a small group of established contractors. Competition was limited because entering the market required extraordinary amounts of money, technical expertise, and years of experience. To most entrepreneurs, those barriers looked impossible. To SpaceX, they looked like an opportunity. History shows that industries with the highest barriers often create the biggest rewards for companies willing to rethink them. Instead of asking how to fit into the existing system, SpaceX asked a different question. What if the system itself is the problem? That question changed everything. Rather than competing on small improvements, the company set out to change the economics of launching rockets altogether. If it could make access to space significantly cheaper, it wouldn't just take customers from competitors. It could create entirely new demand. Businesses that had never considered launching satellites suddenly could. Research projects that were once too expensive became possible. The market itself could expand. That's one of the most important lessons in business. The biggest opportunities don't always come from taking market share. Sometimes they come from making something so much more affordable or accessible that entirely new customers enter the market. SpaceX wasn't just trying to build rockets, it was trying to build a future where space became part of everyday business. But challenging an industry begins with challenging its assumptions. And that's where SpaceX's greatest competitive advantage first appeared. Changing an industry doesn't start with better technology, it starts with better thinking. Most companies improve by copying what already works. They study competitors, adopt best practices, and try to become a little faster, a little cheaper, or a little more efficient. That approach can produce steady growth. But it rarely changes an industry. One of the ideas most closely associated with Elon Musk is first principles thinking. Breaking a problem down to its most fundamental truths instead of accepting conventional wisdom. Imagine someone tells you a rocket costs hundreds of millions of dollars to build. Most businesses would ask, how can we reduce that cost by 10%? SpaceX asked a different question. what actually makes up the cost of a rocket? The answer wasn't just metal, engines, electronics, and fuel. Much of the cost came from years of accepted processes, multiple layers of suppliers, slow manufacturing cycles, and assumptions that no one had seriously challenged in decades. That realization changed everything. Instead of improving the existing process, SpaceX began redesigning it. It questioned why rockets were built the way they were, why development took so long, why manufacturing depended on so many outside companies, and why the industry accepted costs that seemed untouchable. Questioning assumptions doesn't mean ignoring expertise. It means refusing to confuse tradition with necessity. That's an important distinction. Some of the world's most successful companies didn't win because they had the smartest people. They won because they asked better questions than everyone else. For SpaceX, first principles thinking wasn't a one-time exercise. It became the foundation for every major decision the company made. And soon, that way of thinking led to another bold realization. If you want to control cost, you first have to control how your product is built. Changing the way you think is powerful, but changing the way you build can transform an entire business. Traditional aerospace companies relied on thousands of suppliers. One company built the engines, another supplied electronics, another manufactured structural components. Each supplier added cost, delays, and complexity. If one part of the chain slowed down, the entire project slowed down. SpaceX believed there was a better way. Instead of outsourcing most of the work, it chose to manufacture many critical components in-house. That decision wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about controlling the parts of the business that mattered most. When engineers identified a problem, they didn't have to wait months for multiple suppliers to respond. Designers, manufacturers, and testing teams could work together, make changes quickly, and immediately test improvements. That shortened one of the most valuable resources in business: time. Faster feedback meant faster learning. Faster learning led to better products. Better products attracted more customers, and more customers generated more launches, creating even more experience and data. The cycle reinforced itself. This is why the strongest businesses often focus less on maximizing short-term profits and more on strengthening the systems that produce long-term advantages. Of course, vertical integration isn't the right strategy for every company. Many successful businesses thrive by outsourcing. The lesson isn't to copy SpaceX. The lesson is to identify the parts of your business that create the greatest competitive advantage and protect them. For SpaceX, manufacturing became far more than an operational decision. It became a strategic advantage. But even that couldn't solve the industry's biggest problem, because every successful launch still ended with something incredibly expensive being thrown away. And that raised a question almost no one had seriously asked before. What if rockets didn't have to be disposable? Imagine if an airline threw away every airplane after a single flight. No company could survive with a business model like that. Yet for decades, that's essentially how the rocket industry operated. A rocket completed its mission, and most of it was lost forever. The next launch meant building another one from scratch. It was accepted as the cost of doing business. SpaceX refused to accept it. The company didn't invent the idea of reusable rockets. Engineers had explored the concept for years. The challenge wasn't imagining it. It was making it practical, reliable, and economically worthwhile. Most experts believed the effort wasn't worth the cost. Recovering rockets would be too difficult. Refurbishing them would be too expensive. The risks would outweigh the rewards. SpaceX saw the problem differently. If airplanes, cargo ships, and trains are designed to operate repeatedly, why should the most expensive part of a space mission be used only once? That single question reshaped the company's future. Recovering a rocket wasn't simply an engineering milestone. It was a business strategy. Every successful landing meant fewer components needed to be rebuilt for future missions. Over time, that opened the door to lower launch costs, higher launch frequency, and a stronger competitive position. The first attempts failed. Some boosters exploded. Others crashed into the ocean. A few landed, only to tip over moments later. To critics, those failures looked like proof the idea would never work. To SpaceX, they were something else. Feedback. Every failed landing revealed a weakness. Every weakness became an improvement. Eventually, what once seemed impossible became routine. Today, seeing a booster return safely to Earth feels almost ordinary. But that ordinary moment represents years of persistence, and one of the greatest cost-saving innovations in modern aerospace. The lesson extends far beyond rockets. Most companies try to compete by selling more. The smartest companies first ask how they can deliver the same value more efficiently than anyone else. Because changing your cost structure can be more powerful than simply increasing your sales. But lowering costs alone wasn't enough. To survive, SpaceX still had to prove something even more important, that customers could trust it. Trust isn't built through advertising. It's built through results. For a young company trying to enter the space industry, that was a problem. Every failed launch raised doubts. Every delay gave customers another reason to choose established competitors. In its early years, SpaceX suffered multiple launch failures, each one costing precious time, money, and credibility. By 2008, the company was approaching a breaking point. After 3 failed Falcon 1 launches, it had enough resources for just one more attempt. If the 4th mission failed, SpaceX might not survive. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This time, the rocket reached orbit. That success changed everything. Not because it made SpaceX an industry leader overnight, but because it proved the company could deliver. Soon after, NASA awarded SpaceX a major commercial resupply contract, providing both financial stability and something equally valuable: credibility. But here's the deeper lesson. Success wasn't the result of avoiding failure. It was the result of learning faster than failure could defeat the company. Each unsuccessful launch produced data. Each redesign improved the next mission. Each test accelerated progress. While many organizations spend years trying to eliminate every possible risk before acting, SpaceX accepted that real innovation requires carefully managed experimentation. That doesn't mean being reckless. It means treating every setback as an opportunity to improve rather than a reason to quit. Businesses often fear failure because they see it as the opposite of success. In reality, failure becomes dangerous only when nothing is learned from it. SpaceX built systems that transformed mistakes into better decisions, and over time, those better decisions became a competitive advantage. Learning from failure earned SpaceX a second chance. Now it had to earn something even harder: the confidence of the world's biggest customers. A brilliant product means very little if no one is willing to buy it. For SpaceX, the greatest challenge wasn't building rockets. It was convincing customers to trust a young company with missions worth hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars. In the space industry, trust isn't earned through promises. It's earned through performance. Every successful launch became more than a technical achievement. It became proof that SpaceX could deliver. Proof that it could compete with companies that had dominated the industry for decades. And proof that choosing a newcomer wasn't as risky as many believed. Around this time, NASA began looking beyond traditional aerospace contractors. Rather than building and operating every spacecraft itself, the agency increasingly partnered with private companies that could provide reliable launch and transportation services. For SpaceX, this was a defining opportunity. Winning NASA contracts didn't magically create a successful business. The company had already spent years developing its technology and proving its capabilities. But those contracts did something incredibly important. They gave SpaceX credibility. When one of the world's most respected space agencies trusted the company with critical missions, commercial customers paid attention. Confidence spread. More customers signed on. More launches followed. And with every successful mission, trust continued to compound. That's a lesson every entrepreneur should remember. Your first major customer is valuable because of the revenue they bring, but they're often even more valuable because they make it easier for everyone else to say yes. Reputation is one of the few business assets that grows stronger every time you keep your promises. For SpaceX, Every launch wasn't just another mission. It was another reason for the market to believe. But relying on launch contracts alone would always place a limit on growth. SpaceX wasn't trying to build a successful launch company. It was building something much bigger. Many companies depend on a single source of income. When sales are strong, everything looks stable. But when markets change, that dependence quickly becomes a weakness. SpaceX saw an opportunity to think differently. Instead of viewing rockets as the final product, it viewed them as the foundation for an entire ecosystem. The clearest example is Starlink. Rather than launching satellites only for paying customers, SpaceX began deploying thousands of its own satellites to create a global internet network. This fundamentally changed the business. Instead of earning revenue only when a rocket launched, the company could also generate recurring income from millions of internet subscribers. That recurring revenue creates stability. It helps fund future innovation, and it reduces dependence on any single market or customer. Even more importantly, each part of the business strengthens the others. The rockets launch Starlink satellites. Starlink generates recurring revenue. That revenue helps finance the development of even better rockets and spacecraft. It's a system where each success supports the next. This is one of the hallmarks of great businesses. They don't simply sell products. They build ecosystems that become increasingly valuable over time. For entrepreneurs, the lesson is simple. Don't just ask, what else can I sell? Ask, what else becomes possible because of what I've already built? That question often reveals opportunities your competitors never see. A strategy can be brilliant on paper, but strategies don't execute themselves. People do. Technology can be copied. Products eventually improve. Even pricing advantages rarely last forever. But one competitive advantage is far more difficult to replicate. Culture. SpaceX became known for setting exceptionally high standards. Engineers are encouraged to solve difficult problems quickly, challenge assumptions with evidence, and take ownership of their work. The expectations are demanding, but so is the mission. That mission matters. People are often willing to work harder when they believe they're contributing to something larger than themselves. For SpaceX, building rockets was never presented as the final destination. The company's broader vision, advancing humanity's ability to live and work beyond Earth, gave employees a purpose that extended beyond the next project. Purpose doesn't replace execution. It strengthens it. A talented team without direction can waste enormous potential. A clear mission, combined with capable people, creates alignment, and alignment creates speed. Another lesson often overlooked is that culture isn't defined by what a company says. It's defined by what it consistently rewards. Reward careful thinking, and people think more carefully. Reward initiative, and people take initiative. Reward accountability, and accountability becomes part of everyday behavior. Over time, those repeated actions become habits. Those habits become culture, and that culture influences every decision the business makes. For entrepreneurs, this raises an important question. If someone joined your business tomorrow, what behaviors would they learn simply by watching your team? Because every company has a culture. The most successful ones build it intentionally. A strong culture helps a company move faster, but speed alone isn't enough. You also need to know where you're going. In business, time can be one of the greatest competitive advantages. Many companies make decisions based on the next quarter, the next sales target, the next earnings report. Those goals matter. But companies that think only about short-term results often struggle to build lasting advantages. SpaceX consistently made investments whose payoff might not be seen for years. Developing reusable rockets required enormous patience before the economics became clear. Building Starlink demanded years of launches before it could become a global communications network. Neither decision produced instant rewards. Both required believing that today's sacrifices would create tomorrow's opportunities. That's one of the defining characteristics of exceptional businesses. They balance short-term execution with long-term vision. They understand that lasting success isn't built through one brilliant decision. It's built through thousands of disciplined decisions that compound over time. This is true for businesses, it's true for investing, and it's true for life. The future rarely changes overnight. It changes because someone consistently makes choices that others are unwilling to make until it's too late. SpaceX understood that, and perhaps that's why it succeeded where so many believed it would fail. When you step back and look at the entire journey, one thing becomes clear. SpaceX didn't win because of a single breakthrough. It won because every strategy reinforced the next. When most people watch a SpaceX launch, they see the countdown, the engines, the fire, the precision. What they don't see are the thousands of business decisions that made that moment possible. SpaceX questioned assumptions instead of accepting them. It focused on fundamentals instead of tradition. It brought critical capabilities in-house to move faster and control costs. It turned failures into feedback. It earned trust one successful mission at a time. It built an ecosystem instead of relying on a single product. It created a culture driven by purpose. And it invested for decades while much of the world focused on the next quarter. None of these strategies guaranteed success on their own. Together, they created something far more powerful, a business that became increasingly difficult to compete against. That's the real lesson behind SpaceX. Extraordinary companies rarely succeed because they do one thing better. They succeed because every decision supports the next, creating momentum that compounds year after year. Whether you're building a company, managing a career, or investing for the future, the principle is the same. Question assumptions. Think from first principles. Build systems, not shortcuts. Play the long game, because the companies that change the world don't simply build better products, they build better ways of thinking. And in the end, that may be SpaceX's greatest innovation of all. If you enjoyed this video, don't just take the story of SpaceX with you, take the mindset. Because the greatest lesson isn't about rockets, technology, or even Elon Musk. It's about what happens when you stop accepting the way things have always been done and start asking, is there a better way? If this video gave you a new perspective on business, innovation, and what it takes to build something extraordinary, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who is building a business, chasing a big idea, or simply thinking differently about their future, share this video with them. Because sometimes, one idea can change the way you see an entire industry. And sometimes, one new way of thinking can change the direction of your entire life. Keep learning, keep questioning, keep building. And remember, the biggest opportunities are often hiding behind the assumptions everyone else has stopped questioning. I'll see you in the next one.